Hello everyone, finally making another video here. I know I originally was going to do one, I think talking about casual players, but there were a lot of things that were maybe going to happen, maybe not. And one of the things was I actually have a script for a different video for like healer design, which I think I still am going to do. Because I already have the script ready. I made it yesterday as of recording this video, and I think I just might pump out 2 videos this week instead of 1. But I did know at the time I was making that script that the balance change was supposed to go out like literally the next day or today as of recording, but then we got an update about it, and I want to kind of go through the update with you guys and kind of talk about some of the things. And also, again, the CBT starts global on 2 days from now. I think it's on Friday. I'm recording this on Wednesday. And unfortunately, I haven't gotten a key yet. Still hoping that maybe I'll squeeze one out by the end of today, but no guarantees there. And then otherwise, I can still potentially win one from the event in the official Discord, which you can as well if you haven't already tried doing that. And then otherwise, there seems like there's going to be some way of obtaining keys or entry to the game once the game is actually live for the days that it is live for. So maybe I can squeeze in at some point there as well. Some people talked about whether they would do like Twitch drops or something. I have no idea, but we'll see. Either way though, let's get into the video where they talk about the balance adjustment. So we're going to skip this part. And I'm not really going to read all this because I kind of actually did before. I just want to talk about the keynotes of it, I suppose. But the biggest thing is there were a lot of conversation, especially in the database Discord, about whether the balance that existed on the Pathfinder server, which is basically their testing server for China, was a little all over the place, where like some classes were maybe too nerfed and other classes were maybe not as buffed as they should, whatever it was. And they ended up delaying it even more. So they said here it was supposed to be released today, but over the past 4 days, they got a lot of feedback, which they did, and now they're extending it again for another week, which is probably for the best. I think that this is very, very much a good thing. Again, if you paid attention to the conversations at all happening around the balance, there was a lot of concerns, I think, for certain things. Again, some of it was a lot of it was from leaks that probably shouldn't have happened, and because there is NDAs with the Pathfinder server, so I don't really know how and why people violate them, but it is what it is. But either way, they're planning on delaying it and making more changes and further adjustments for each of the classes. And I think they also talked about like that it is Pathfinder server is under NDA, so that type of stuff technically shouldn't even be released, but they'll deal with it kind of as is. But then we go to the actual balance philosophy, which is a great question, which they're asking here, which is why must we weaken overpowered classes instead of strengthening weaker classes to the same level? So this is a conversation I also saw in the Discord, and it's a conversation for all genres of games that have any form of like balance, whether it's like competitive or not, which is some argue that buffing is better than nerfing, and like always buffing is better than nerfing, right? Like maybe, and what I mean by that is like if there's things that are already strong, you don't even need to touch them, just buff everything else to be in line with them. That is a strategy, and I think even for some time I fully believed it. I still do believe typically that buffing is, I don't want to say better, but maybe more appeasing to people than nerfing. But it depends, and I think a lot of this actually just involves or revolves around the fact that I think developers are not great at nerfing effectively, because the issue isn't necessarily nerfing itself, but rather that nerfing typically makes the class less fun to play. But on the contrary, sometimes buffing also makes a class unfun to play. If you have a class that's supposed to have multiple options outside of a move or ability, this is more like a fighting game analogy, but if you have a move that can do like a high, medium, or low, mix up, but then the medium one gets buffed and is now like plus on block, uninterruptible, whatever. The high and low options are now meaningless because the medium option is just always better because you just get to reset your pressure and whatnot. So you can actually have buffs make the class less fun to play because it actually makes there be less strategy because there's something that's clearly better than the rest. So you kind of have to be careful with it either way. So I actually think that the developers are right here, and some people in the Discord as well have talked about it, where sometimes you do need to nerf. There are legitimate reasons to nerf, even at the same time as you're buffing. For sure, your buff priority should be on things that are weaker than everything else, and your nerf priority should be on things that are perhaps too strong. And they specifically say some classes were way too overpowered when their skills combined with their talents and all that like exceeded their own design expectations, which I talked about as well. As it really depends on what the developers intended classes to be able to do, and some of them were clearly outperforming more than they intended them to do, which happens. That is happening, and that happens. It's part of the game, or part of designing a game, is you're going to get stuff like that that you might not be able to catch until people are like fully optimizing it in a team setting. And they said it created an imbalance between these classes and other classes, significantly reducing their potential for growth and ultimately leading to a lack of playability in later stages of the game. I think the biggest example of this is like the Thornlash style for Oracle is really bad. Most people consider it a troll pick, and if I release my other video about healing design, I talk about it there and why it's so bad. Also, if you ever watched Chishia's video, talking about the two subclasses, which they might go back and do after the changes actually go through, but they talk about as well how bad the Thornlash style is in that video. And then they said if we simply adjust the values to strengthen other weak professions to the same level as the current strong ones, it may lead to an emergence of another group of strong professions, making the current game environment more distorted, which is basically just talking about power creep. But this is actually talking about it for buffing the weaker classes to be at the same level. Again, I think there is some amount of kind of give and pull to this, where like things can be weak and still be viable. I think the biggest thing, which again I talk about in my video that I have yet to release on healer design, but it applies to everything beyond healers, is things can be weak and strong. You're always going to have that, and that's fine. I don't think that that's necessarily an issue, but everything should be viable. Just because something is viable does not mean it's the strongest at doing what it needs to do. It just means that it can do it, and that is fundamentally, I believe, the most important part, is that everything should be able to clear everything in this game. But so they talk about this being essentially a two-way road for skills and talents, and they're grateful for the feedback. And then they kind of go into the actual strategy for each of the class. Some of these things I know a little bit more than others, so some of these things I might kind of skip over, but we'll see. For Ice Spear subclass for Ice Mage, they said that the late game damage ceiling or damage scaling was pretty low, and so they're actually going to fix this, because I think they said, the Ice Spear has reduced overall DPS when you're not in your ice infusion state or whatever. So after the adjustment, the overall output, meaning damage output cycle of the Ice Spear flow, will be smoother, avoiding situations where you're kind of stuck and your output of damage is limited. Which is interesting, because I thought Ice Spear was actually like really high already. Maybe it was not high in the previous Pathfinder build, I'm not really sure. Maybe they nerfed it and now they're bringing it back, but I don't know. Ray Stream, which I believe was weaker because it was nerfed quite significantly from the Chinese beta. They're addressing the low ice energy regeneration benefit and rebalancing Mastery's reward, which this isn't the only class that I think is getting that scaling. A lot of classes I think are actually scaling more off of Mastery now, because when I read the patch notes earlier, there was a few like that. And we've adjusted the initial damage multiplier and damage scaling over time, and changed the skill type to an area of effect skill, which probably just means even better at AoE, which is kind of, I think, where Ice Ray is really good at, is in general supposed to be AoE. And significantly increases the damage of Ray Flow. So increased damage for both of these classes, which, sure, that's fine. And then we have Wind Knight. This, I believe, is Overdrive style. Heavy armor is what the translation says, but I think it's Overdrive, which is like the grounded version. The build had issues with equipment performance by repeated activation of certain talents. Many talents' damage boosting effects were not taking effect, which impacted the damage. So I don't know if maybe a lot of these were like talent bugs that just weren't being applied that led to a lack of damage, but they said that the round of adjustments will adjust these issues and optimize the damage in dungeons and mid-game environments after Wind Ring is deactivated. So I suppose this is a buff, and maybe when the buff expires there was a lot of lack of damage otherwise. So again, not too sure about this one because I haven't seen many people play it, because I've heard this is actually one of the hardest classes to play, and so I don't really know much about it at all. But then you have the aerial style, and this one I believe they are nerfing, which I can understand why. I think this was one of the highest damages or damage classes, at least in live server. I think it was nerfed in the previous Pathfinder one, but either way, it was largely they're targeting the tornadoes. But I think they're kind of doing a buff and nerf to it, because they said that the damage contribution of the tornado is too high, but it can't trigger lucky hit, which indirectly leads to a low luck benefit for the style. So they're reducing the damage of the tornadoes that spawn, but then they're also increasing the effect of the luck benefit. So I don't know, some of this is confusing. Where are they gonna make the tornadoes trigger luck? Because they say that specifically it can't, which leads to the low luck benefit, but then they don't actually mention if the tornado will be able to trigger it, or at least in the translation I'm using it doesn't say that, but I assume maybe it does, or at the very least, you know, Aerial Knight is going to get more out of luck, which there's a few classes I think that need that quite a bit. Then we go into Thunder Swordsman, or Stormblade, I believe. Thunder Swordsman I think was original translation for it, but I think it's Stormblade. And we got the Ido style here, which talks about in the current one, it's an agility based, and it suffers from a fragile physique and unstable burst, making it difficult to fully utilize the burst damage. I don't know if this is necessarily true. I've seen some people be able to do quite a bit of damage, but they just say it's like very polarizing in terms of its damage. I think that's just how a melee is. I think, you know, that's kind of the design of a melee, so them trying to smooth it out, I mean, cool, maybe that's for the best, but it's interesting. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing here to make the burst more consistent, and how it's going to impact the balance, but this one's kind of doesn't actually say anything. Like, it points out an issue and it says that they're resolving it, but it doesn't really say how that's going to affect their actual damage output. It might not change it at all, but they just said can be more stable at completing all its damage cycles during burst. So I don't know. But here's the big one. Moonblade. Absolutely horrendous in live right now on the Chinese build, and it's because it, I think, involves luck, which is just a terrible stat right now. And so what they're doing is, and they point out here, the skills and talents just have super low scaling, resulting in a subpar dungeon performance. It's the worst of all the DPS, I believe. Therefore, they're focusing on the talents, so they're modifying and strengthening their effects. I think like one of them literally has like the thing that spawns the scythe makes it do less damage or whatever. I don't know. They had like one of their talents where it like specifically said like this now does less damage, and it's like, why would you have that as like a talent to obtain? Like, if this is a talent that's supposed to increase damage, why would you have something that just makes it do less damage? It makes no sense. And they're adding synergies that are heavily influenced by haste and luck. So my guess also is, like, again, I think they're doing an adjustment for luck here, so it'll probably benefit more from it. I mean, specifically, they say the adjustment will significantly improve the output performance of Moonblade, I should say. And I've also seen, I think, if they're still carrying it from the previous Pathfinder build, but people were saying that the haste changes with how it scales with the damage for Moonblade as well was like crazy, where like you could get like, I think it was haste scaling with attack speed or something, so it was like 80% attack speed maybe, which you could get with like 50 or 60% haste, like would almost like quadruple your damage output on Moonblade. I don't know if it's still going to be like that in this version of the Pathfinder build, but either way, it seems like Moonblade is going to be significantly better, which is definitely good because this was lacking severely. Then we go to the Archer, or let me check what it's called again. Sometimes I forget the names of these classes. Marksman, right? In the current live environment, Beast Tamer has some bugs that prevent its skills from taking effect. But I believe this is the Beast style does crazy damage right now. So they're nerfing the the critical strike skills far exceed design expectations. Therefore, they're going to address bugs, correcting some of the talents and 2 piece set effects not taking effect. And then they're going to actually lower the haste benefit while also controlling some of the excessive critical damage talents that it has. But then the Falconry one, which I believe was really strong during closed beta, is now underperforming. Although I think it's still like decent damage, it's not great. And again, you're always going to have winners and losers, so I don't know what they're going to decide in that regard. I don't know, to me melees should be doing more damage than the ranged classes should do, so I don't know if it's going to ever end up like that, but that's how I personally feel. Although some of that might be some Final Fantasy 14 bias there, but either way, Eagle Style is underperforming, and this is due to some stiffness of the skills and the attack scaling not being appropriate. And same thing for its burst. So they plan to extend the sharpshooter burst duration, increase its attack benefit from haste, similar to I believe Moonblade and how it's getting there, and optimizing the calculation method for implosion, and fixing the issue of missing eagle damage, which shouldn't have been missing in the first place, I suppose. Which they say improves the burst output and overall damage performance, which is nice. This, I believe, is Verdant Oracle, and punishment is Thorn Lash. And some of the things here are really good, but we'll have to see. They're going to address bugs that prevented Smite Speaker from providing consistent healing. I don't know what skill this is supposed to be. I'm not aware of any called that or similar to that. I don't know. I'd have to see around and see what the actual translation is going to be, or what skill is supposed to be. But from providing consistent healing to the team in high pressure environments, yeah, healing is on Thornlash is terrible. It literally is a troll pick, so or a throw pick in higher end like master dungeons and even the like 20-man raids. It's really bad at keeping people alive. And also prevented thorn-based talents from providing increased benefit when dealing with multiple targets. So following these adjustments, the damage and healing of infusion and thorn-related abilities will be significantly increased, which is nice. So I still think that there's a bit of a design flaw with Thornlash, being that it's supposed to have more damage than the healing style, but still less healing than the healing style. But then the healing style provides offensive and defensive utility more than the Thornlash style does. So really the Thornlash style, the only thing it has over it is the damage, which it's not really that great at. If the damage is going to be significantly higher, I mean, we're talking like maybe it'll start to be maybe not the exact same, but close to Soul Musician's DPS path, then yeah, I mean, that'll be really nice. And of course, if it is able to heal, even if it's less than the healing style, but it's still able to heal enough to keep people alive, which is the most important part, right? Again, Thornlash does not need to out-heal healing style. It just needs to be viable enough to heal through every situation. It can still be harder to heal. It just needs to be able to do it, though. So if they're able to accomplish that, then I think Thornlash is going to be for sure viable. It probably still won't be as good as healing style, though, in terms of, again, the damage bonus for the whole party and whatnot, because you get more consistent offensive utility from healing style. But it'll still be good, so I'm excited to see this, because if it's viable and usable, and especially it seems like it might even be better in multi-target environments, kind of like how like Ice Ray is for Ice Mage, where it just is better actually at dealing with like grouped enemies. So that'll be cool if there's a little bit more benefit there. Again, healing styles are already great. Its overall team survival ability hasn't met expectations. This change aims to normalize the effectiveness of the healing build, sustained healing, allowing team to use other skills. So I think they're actually buffing the healing on certain things to make it so that you don't have to, well, actually, I don't know. This says other skills respond to high healing pressure rather than relying solely on a single skill for unproductive excessive healing. So maybe they're nerfing one healing skill but buffing the other ones. I'm not sure. but they probably want to make the healing rotation a little bit more complicated, which I think is fine, because healing style does do an absurd amount of healing, I think, comparatively to the other healers like Soul Musician or Thornlash. Speaking of which, so this is the DPS path, which I think is called like Dissonance or Distortion. I don't remember what it's called. But they said that Raging Sound. Yeah, I think that's what the translation was. As a melee healer, it had significant survivability pressure in the current dungeon environment. Therefore, this adjustment enhances its survivability in positional combat, while further strengthening its ability to assist the team in destroying targets. To me, this means I don't know what the enhanced survivability is going to look like. I don't know if that's potentially more healing or damage reduction or something. And then assist the team in destroying its targets. To me, it actually just says more damage, which is crazy because as a melee healer, it does pretty good damage. It like sometimes was almost outperforming Moonblade, which admittedly was really low compared to the other DPS, but it was still higher than all the tanks. And again, coming from Final Fantasy, you will never find a healer ever outdoing a tank in terms of DPS. So it's very interesting. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how its healing is though, because I'm not sure about this path if its healing is fine for keeping people alive, but you know, it is what it is, I suppose. But speaking of that, the Concerto Flow is one where I think it looks like they're both buffing and nerfing. They're buffing the healing, as mentioned here. It still has issues with healing. Yeah, they're strengthening the speaker recovery amplification capabilities, but then they're and lowering the casting requirements for medium cooldown health boosting skills, allowing them to cast healing skills promptly under high pressure situations. But then they're nerfing the damage bonus from Concerto style or concert style because it was really high. They basically had like the highest, I think, party-wide damage buff out of all of the classes. That it was lower when it wasn't available, because unlike healing style on Oracle, where it's just consistent, it's like a consistent raw value. Concert style was percentage based, so it actually scale, I think, really high, but it was also tied to a cooldown, whereas again healing style is not. But they're still choosing to nerf it, which is fine. You know, hopefully it's maybe not too much, and again, as long as it's still viable, it'll be great. And you know, maybe it still will have a higher burst ceiling than healing style will have. And then we go into the tanks with Shield Knight and what is it? Heavy Guardian. Yeah, or Aegis Knight. I think it's called Shield Knight though. Yeah, so I think largely for Shield Knight, they're just tackling its kind of defensive capabilities. It has, I think there's been some issues with Shield Knight actually being able to take damage sufficiently. So yeah, for this one, they're increasing the stacking effect efficiency of Shield of Light and improving the benefits of Mastery. So this is the other one where like they're improving the benefits of Mastery. So it seems like Mastery they're increasing the benefit of, and then Luck, and then also Haste for a lot of classes. So the protection style, I think this is the healing one. Consumption of holy mandates with a high frequency of its enhanced skills requiring no consumption has resulted in some talent synergies being too cost effective. Protection and regeneration builds will now count their synergy with holy mandates even when using no consumption, increasing the benefits of associated talents. It almost seems like a nerf, but I think this is a buff. Again, I can't really talk too much about this. The tanks I haven't really looked too much into. And then light shield build, high health to absorb damage is insufficient, requiring more stable means of damage reduction, increasing the synergy between health and certain skills, and also fixing the haste benefit. So again, this was haste being more beneficial, to improve tankiness. So making this one more tanky. As a class with consistently high haste, the benefits of haste were somewhat undesirable as they were only reflected in resources. And so the damage is now actually benefiting from haste, aside from just the resources, which is nice. So expect higher damage output on this class. And then finally, we have, again, Heavy Guardian, Rock Shield Flow. I forget what the actual name for this one is, but maybe it is just called like Rock Style or something. I don't know. I think this was the really tanky one. This round of adjustment optimizes, yes, mechanics and fixes bugs, ensures the shield destroying mechanic maintains its defensive capabilities while also returning its damage capacity to its intended design. I think I had heard that this was this path or this subclass had fairly low damage in the previous Pathfinder server, so I think they're bringing it back in line to be a little bit higher. And all that. With these adjustments, adventurers can more frequently and freely choose when to release their attacks to adapt to different combat situations, which is fine. Again, I think this is the tankiest of all the tanks, although maybe this one is now as well, but I don't know, we'll see. But I think it did pretty bad damage, but now they're buffing its damage a little bit, which is cool. And then block style, I think, had not as good damage reduction. The results in its damage reduction and damage capabilities were lower than expected in single combat situations, primarily probably against like bosses and the raids and whatnot. And so they're directly increasing its damage to compensate for the lack of output in its style core gameplay. I don't know if they're affecting its damage reduction at all. It doesn't really say it here, but I would have assumed that they still do. At the very least, they're increasing its damage, which is fine. If they want this style to do more damage than this one, but maybe this one to be slightly more tankier, that's fine, right? Shield Knight is the same thing, but I don't know if they're also going to buff its other stuff. And then there's stuff here. Mainly the only thing here that's relevant is the books, and it's kind of a buff and a nerf. They're adding a I think they're adding a permanent. Yeah, the Rose Gem shop will now have effectively a reset item for 200 Rose Gems bound that can give you back your skill books, but previously they were going to give you back, I think, a box that would have allowed you to select your skill books for any other class. Skill books are their greatest issue right now, honestly. For me, at least, I think it's the biggest issue that's plaguing the game right now, and it's like such an easy fix for them, and I don't know what the reasoning is for it, because I was trying to ask before I recorded this video if there was some like financial incentive to it, but you can't buy these. The only way that you can get skill books in the game, you can't buy them at all. You can only get them from playing the game by doing like, I think, tower and I don't know, maybe some like weeklies and stuff like that, and you can get like boxes where you can open them, which may or may not give skill books for your class. But you can only earn them from playing the game. You can sell them on the auction house, which, maybe you can convert real money to like Luna or whatever to buy it from the auction house, but otherwise you can't actually purchase them. So financially, it doesn't seem like there's much of an incentive for them to keep these as being as rare and expensive as they are in terms of in-game value, like in-game currency value. They should really just make, like, this item is fine. I think this item is fine. If this item allowed you to reset your skill books and like choose whatever skill books you wanted for like a different class, then that would literally fix everything, I think, here. But the issue is right now they actually changed it from allowing you to reset again your skill books to change it to any class. Now it's only for the class that you have, which I think means at best you can maybe change subclasses, because I think the subclasses still use the same skill books, but you can't actually change to another class with this item expecting to get the skill books back, because you're just only gonna get the skill books for the same class. So hopefully maybe after this next batch of or this next week of the Pathfinder server they change that, because they really should. Like, this is, I think, one of their biggest issues. I know that there's the Imagine issue, but I think, I don't know, to some degree it's not as big in my eyes as the other stuff, because again, I think Imagines, gold Imagines, whatever, do they help? Yeah, but I think if you play well enough, you'll be able to outperform them. And so to me, this is the biggest problem, because like for a game that allows you to play multiple classes on one character, they make it incredibly hard to want to play multiple classes on one character. Like, seriously, like, you almost would rather make an alt so that at the very least you're getting the same amount of books for those class or that class on that character as you are on your other one, right? So I really think that they should, like, this item is fine, especially if this is going to be permanent, but like it should allow you to get the books back and then allow you to exchange them for like books for a different class. I don't know why they don't do that, but hopefully they will eventually change that. That's my biggest concern. And then there's some other stuff, but not really worth talking about it because it's not in the scope of this video. Overall, I know this was probably quite long. What is it at? 30 minutes. Whew. Yeah, that's about as long as my patch note things were for previous games, but I think it was still important to go over this, and I'm still okay with it being that long. I'm not planning on editing this like crazy, but we'll see what the aftermath of these changes are and if people like them better. Certainly they seem more appealing. It seems like a lot of the flaws in classes like Moonblade and Thornlash are being addressed, which I think is really big, and the Beastmaster is being toned down, which I think is good. And to be honest, they're not nerfing many of them, so really the only one that I've heard have nerfed is the aerial one, and mainly it's due to Tornado, which I don't think is going to impact single target damage as much. I think the Tornadoes were mostly impacting like multi-target damage, but maybe it'll bring it down a little bit. But really the only ones that got nerfed are the aerial style for Wind Knight and then the Beastmaster style for Marksman. Everything else has basically all been buffs for classes, which is fine. But yeah, I think that's about it for this video. So thank you all for watching. And again, I'll update you if I do get a key, in which case expect to see some quite a bit more videos on the actual game. But otherwise I'll be tuning in to seeing, you know, all the NA players playing. So look forward to that. And again, I probably will release my other video on healing design in this game soon after. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you